Oh, we're live. Good evening, everybody.
Hello,
Hello.
Do you know who you are tonight?
I'm Amanda.
I might be David. Maybe. Maybe I'm Amanda too.
He might be Richard
I
tonight.
might be Richard. Good possibility. We are in chapter 24 of Job. This is a continuation of last week's Job's speech.
Yes. Yes.
Job goes deep tonight.
He does.
Okay, we're gonna get going because y'all don't know, but we're running late. Mine's 1 through 8. What's yours?
Mine actually goes 1 through 17, so we can bring
Oh
it
yeah,
up.
we're gonna bring it up 1 through 8. I'm going through 17 passages. Okay. All right. Why don't you read yours so we can see how they differ? Then I'm gonna read mine.
All right. Why does the Almighty not reserve times for judgment? Why do those who know Him never see His days? The wicked displace boundary markers. They steal a flock and provide pasture for it. They drive away the donkeys owned by the fatherless and take the widow's ox as collateral. They push the needy off the road. The poor of the land are forced into hiding. Like wild donkeys in the wilderness, the poor go out to their task of foraging for food. The desert provides nourishment for their children. They gather their fodder in the field and glean the vineyards of the wicked. Without clothing, they spend the night naked, having no covering against the cold. Drenched by mountain rains, they huddle against the rocks, shelterless.
Pretty close to NLT. The New Living Translation starts, why doesn't the Almighty bring the wicked to judgment? Why doesn't He? Why does God wait?
Why does God wait to punish the
Yeah.
wicked? No. Maybe they'll redeem themselves.
That's a good possibility. If there's a chance for redemption,
Yeah.
then God, what was it? God is long suffering
Yes.
and patient. So yeah, if He sees a chance that this person might redeem themselves or seek redemption, that could be why He doesn't punish the wicked right away.
Yeah.
Now, why is Job asking the question?
Why is Job asking, why does God wait to punish
Yeah.
the wicked?
Who's He calling the wicked?
His friends.
I think so, yeah. I look back over the last chapter, and this is just a continuation of his speech from last week.
Mhm.
And he ended it, so He knew to me whatever He has planned, He controls my destiny. No wonder I'm so terrified of His presence. When I think of it, terror grips me. Blah, blah, blah. Darkness is all around me. Thick, impenetrable darkness is everywhere. And then he asked, why doesn't the Almighty bring the wicked to judgment? They don't seem to go together,
No.
unless He's talking about His 3 friends who have come to console Him in His time of grief.
Is that what you call that?
That's what they call it.
Well, you know, I think that the consolation was as long as they were quiet. And then when Job spoke, that's when it all just
They
broke
were
out.
very supportive in the beginning until He opened His mouth.
Yeah, bless his heart.
I guess because when he opened up his mouth, he stepped on their toes.
Maybe, yeah, because they came with preconceived ideas.
And once he spoke, and then they had to justify.
That word justify. You
Yes.
know I love that word justify.
Yes.
So anyway, verse 1, he asked the question, and then he asked, why must the godly wait for Him in vain? That's a deep question when you think about it. You know, waiting in vain means you're waiting for nothing. You know it's not going to happen,
Yes.
so why do we wait on it? And that's his question. He's got, why must we wait in vain? We know it's not going to happen.
What, waiting on
God to
God to
punish
punish
the
the wicked?
Yep.
Well, the wicked will be punished. Maybe not when we want them to be, but they will be punished.
So as a philosophical question, maybe it should be, we should take the question as he's saying, we shouldn't wait. We
Right,
shouldn't care that the wicked aren't being punished yet, because we know it's not gonna happen yet.
right.
So when you wait on it to happen, when you expect it to happen, you're wasting your time.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're wasting your time, number one, but number two, the time that you're wasting, waiting on them to be punished, is time that could be used to do something
Yes, it could be, yeah. You're
better,
right.
something for God. And I think it, you know, that his question, you know, in a sense, should make us think, you know, why are we
Waste-
as the righteous
Right.
worried about the wicked being punished when our job is to win more souls for God?
Right, why are we wasting their time on
Mhm.
something that we can't control and doesn't really matter to us?
Right.
And, you know, that's a good point, because I think we do that a whole
Well,
lot.
I mean, and if you look all over Facebook, all I see is a lot of people wasting time.
Wasting time, yeah, and arguing about things that don't matter.
Exactly.
Uh,
We had that discussion before church.
Yeah, so, you know, he makes good points. He starts out making really good questions to make you think about it.
Yeah.
And then we get into, he goes into this speech of what evil people do, which is almost very close, to saying evil people steal land
Mhm.
by moving boundary markers. That used to be a big thing. You move a fence, so you take somebody's land,
Mhm.
or a little stub in the ground, you dig it up and move it over. It's this is mine. They steal livestock and put them in their own pastures. Now that's pretty brave, because most livestock in the old days was marked. You know, cattle prodding, you know, what they call them things?
Brands.
Brands, yeah. That's why they did it out west, so that if your cow got in someone else's pasture, you go pick it out. They take the orphan's donkey, steal it from the orphans, and demand the widow's ox as security for a loan. That's cruel. You got to think about it, you know, an orphan. I don't think we really understand what these terms mean in their society, but if you're an orphan, you have no parents. So the only thing you got is your possessions. And your donkey can do a lot for you. You can sell it, you could use it to plow the fields, you could use it to travel to somewhere else. So if they steal it, you've got left nothing. So, you know, think of the idea of donkey as your prized possession. What little you have left, they take it. And then they take the ox of the widow. What rights did women have in those days?
None.
None. So her husband dies, she's got nothing. Her ox may be the only thing she's got that can plant a field to bring in income, because, you know, women didn't work. So you could hire someone to come plant the fields and stuff, because you got an ox, think of it like a tractor. So, you know, Job's using these images to convey this idea that you're taking away someone's livelihood. That's what thieves do. Wicked people take away other people's livelihood at the moment they need it the most. The poor are pushed off the path. I think you were saying something about run off the road. I laughed when you said it. Verse 4.
They push the needy off the road.
Off the road. The needy must hide together for their safety. Like wild donkeys in the wilderness, the poor spend most of all their time looking for food, searching even in the desert for food for their children. This happens, we know, all over the world now. They harvest a field they do not own, and they glean in the vineyards of the wicked. All night, now he's talking about the poor here. All night they lie naked in the cold without clothing or covering. They're soaked by mountain showers, and they huddle against the rocks for want of a home. Okay, so we're gonna go a little deep tonight. What is Job saying about the poor? What's our attitude towards the poor supposed to be?
Supposed to be there to help.
Okay, at least not to make their situation worse.
Correct.
Right.
Help if we can. You know, we are to acknowledge that their plight is already difficult. And because we know it's difficult, we should not be doing anything that would make it more difficult for them to live what little existence they're living now. Because that is the definition of a wicked person, someone who understands they don't have anything. I don't care, I'm just going to make it harder for them.
Yeah.
I'm not out here to make their life a little bit easier. We are having that debate in America today. Whether you realize it or not, it's happening. So, we as Christians need to be aware of the fact that people who have little, it's not necessarily their fault. We can't assume it's because they're lazy. Some of them, sure. All of them, no. So we should be compassionate, I guess is the word. Is that the word? Compassionate of their plight. To try to understand why they're at this point in their life and what we can do to make it better. That is our role. If you're not doing that, I think Job's telling us God cast you into the group called wicked. The people that steal what little bit they have and are mean to them and have no concern. I call it arrogance. So you need to question yourself, how do you think about the poor? And we're not talking about those people only who, how do I phrase this?
And everything?
No, I don't say everything, you don't either. Many
Depends
people,
on who's up there with it.
many people think of the poor as those that are lazy and on government assistance, and that's all they want, that's all they do.
No.
But the poor actually includes a lot of working class people
Right.
that struggle to make money to pay the bills to keep their family fed, clothed, and a home over their head. And we need to think that term. And you're always going to have those people that are lazy. God's very clear what we should do to those people.
You got that with the rich people.
With the rich people, you don't work, you don't eat. That's clear in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're dirt poor, there are things you can do to try to help yourself. But what we're talking about here are the people that are trying to help themselves but still are struggling and have a hard plight. And we need to be very compassionate towards those people, especially. And we're not in this country. We want to group everybody that needs help into one lump sum of they're worthless human beings that are just users.
No. Well, yeah.
That's how we want to lump them.
But I also, I don't know, maybe I read too many stories or whatever, but I think a lot of people look at it too, like, why should I help them? They don't do nothing to help me,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean,
We do have that attitude as well. They're not helping me, I don't need to help them. What am I getting out of it? And a lot of times, a lot of the people come from really poor backgrounds and they make it successful in life, and then they forget what it was like to be poor. They forget why they were poor. If you looked up and said, well, your mom and daddy must have been deadbeats and worthless people, they'd argue with you.
yeah.
You say, no, they're not. They weren't. They worked hard. They just couldn't get ahead. The majority of poor people, that's what they face. Throughout the world, I don't care where we go. We go to South America, we go to Africa, we can go to China. You're going to see the same type of people working hard, trying to get ahead, and they can't. We as Christians should have great compassion for those people. That's what I think Job is saying here. That's why he's contrasting the wicked and how they act towards the poor. All right, we're going to move on. What's your next section? 9 through 17?
Yeah.
Go for it.
The fatherless infant is snatched from the breast. The nursing child of the poor is seized as collateral. Without clothing, they wander about naked. They carry sheaves, but go hungry. They crush olives in their presses. They tread the wine presses, but go thirsty. From the city men groan. The mortally wounded cry for help, yet God pays no attention to this crime. The wicked are those who rebel against the light. They do not recognize its ways or stay on its paths. The murderer rises at dawn to kill the poor and needy, and by night he becomes a thief. The adulterer's eye watches for twilight, thinking, No eye will see me, and he covers his face. In the dark they break into houses. By day they lock themselves in, never experiencing the light. For the morning is like darkness to them. Surely they are familiar with the terrors of darkness.
All right, so now really Job's going back and forth. You gotta pay attention here. In verse 9, the wicked snatch a widow's child from her breast, taking the baby's security for a loan. I don't know what they did back in those days, but they apparently
Whatever they wanted.
whatever they wanted. You owed money, they took your child. Are you not grateful we don't live in that day?
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful.
They take the child and use them as a slave.
Yes. And then he jumps to the poor. The poor must go about naked without any clothing. They harvest, pay attention to this part, they harvest food for others while they themselves are starving. They press out olive oil without being allowed to taste it, and they tread in the winepress as they suffer from thirst. I'm going to be honest with you. Every time I read this, the image I have are people in California that live in the Silicon Valley area. They go to work at these big technology companies. They work as maids and cleaners and, you know, the menial jobs. But they can't afford to live there. You know, many of them are homeless, many of them living in cars and RVs in that area because the real estate prices are so high, they don't make enough money to pay to live that way. Now, if you have one of the good jobs in the tech companies, you're making lots of money. They see it, but they can't have it. You know, we kind of have an issue in America today that why are we allowing that? Why is that okay? What you smiling about? I ain't got my glasses up there.
It's not okay.
It's not okay, I agree. You know, but it happens and we're not really up in arms about it. I don't see the people in the church up in arms about it. But there's something wrong there. I mean, if you're living there, if you're working whatever tech company you want to pick, you know, if you got people in there working and making $100,000 a day or a year, and then you got these people over here making, you know, $10, $12, $15 an hour. Why? Why are these people worthless? I don't know. But I do think, you know, sometimes we have gotten a little mixed up in what we will accept. Because I'm not sure God accepts this. But that's what every time I read this part, I keep thinking about that, you know. Or the people that are waiters and waitresses for these fine dining banquets, and they look at all this great food, but they can never eat it.
Yeah.
They can't even grab a bite off the tray as it goes by as they serve it to other people. Now look at verse 12. This is where it gets interesting, I think. The groans of the dying rise from the city, and the wounded cry for help, yet God ignores their moaning. Have you noticed that Job's making observations? This is what he sees. This is what he sees the wicked doing. This is what he sees as the plight of the poor. And this is what he sees God doing. His statement here almost sounds like he disapproves of what God's doing. That's a pretty bold thing to do. Are you bold enough to disapprove of what God's doing? Are you courageous enough to tell God you're wrong? Should we tell God he's wrong? That might be a better question. Caleb, should we tell God he's wrong?
There's times I have told him he was wrong, and then he proved that I was wrong.
Yeah, when is God ever wrong?
He's not.
He's
I ain't
not.
found one yet.
The problem is what we think of God being wrong, he sees things we don't. He understands things we don't. I think the most we can do is say, God, we disagree with what you're doing. We don't like what you're doing. But yeah, I don't think you can honestly tell God he's wrong, because God can't be wrong. So I don't think Job's going there with this statement, that yet God ignores the moaning. He's just making an observation. You know, that this is what happens, God ignores it. He sees it, he knows it, but he's not doing anything about it yet. And then we get to verse 13. Wicked people rebel against the light. They refuse to acknowledge its ways or stay in its paths. This is true. Wicked people always follow their own way. The murderer rises in the early dawn to kill the poor and needy. At night, he is a thief. The adulterer waits for the twilight, saying, no one will see me then. He hides his face so no one will know him. Thieves break into houses at night and sleep in the daytime. They're not acquainted with the light. The black night is their morning. They ally themselves with the terrors of the darkness. What does that remind you of, Amanda?
Huh?
What does that section remind you of? Does it remind you of anything? It reminds me of something.
What does it remind you of?
How Jesus describes Satan,
Yeah.
the thief that comes in the middle of the night, robbing and stealing, hiding in the darkness and the shadows. There's definitely a correlation between this monologue Job's giving and what Jesus described as Satan. So I think we can argue that Job is, whether Satan is a well-known entity at that point in time, the idea of evil is well-known. And you can see by Jesus' time that has been assigned to what we call Satan. All right. Got anything more to say? You're being off course. You're being quiet tonight.
We're not up to par today, right
Okay.
now.
Well, read your last section. Next section. Yours always breaks up differently.
Well, mine goes 18 to 24 and then 25. Do I just need to?
No, just go to 25.
Okay,
Leave
all right.
off one verse.
They float on the surface of the water. Their section of the land is cursed, so that they never go to their vineyards. As dry ground and heat snatch away the melted snow, so Sheol steals those who have sinned. The womb forgets them, worms feed on them, they are remembered no more. So injustice is broken like a tree. They prey on the childless woman who is unable to conceive, and do not deal kindly with the widow. Yet God drags away the mighty by his power. When he rises up, they have no assurance of life. He gives them a sense of security so they can rely on it. But his eyes watch over their ways. They are exalted for a moment, then gone. They are brought low and shrivel up like everything else. They wither like heads of grain. If this is not true, then who can prove me a liar and show that my speech is worthless? I like the way NLT reads verse 25, but anyway.
Yeah, I do too.
It's like a mic drop.
Yeah. Which you're going to see in a moment. So, let's see, 18. But they disappear like foam down a river. Everything they own is cursed, and they are afraid to enter their own vineyards. Now, he just said in verse 12, God ignores the moaning of the poor. And he's asking, why doesn't God judge the wicked already? But then he says in this verse, they disappear like the foam down the river. Everything they own is cursed. Now, my question, is he contradicting himself?
No.
Why not?
Because I think this next section is, is like foretelling what their punishment will be.
That's one way to look at it. Okay. I have a different suggestion. We're going to introduce a concept that's not really ever been introduced in our church, but I think it's valid. You know, it's called natural law. If you remember, the founding of America was based upon the Constitution written upon natural law. They learned it from the Bible. So it is here. I think what he's saying here is God's not doing the punishment yet, but the way God has set up the universe, set up his creation, these people are naturally being punished as they go. That God doesn't have to raise a hand yet in judgment because he's already built it into the programming of creation that yes, while they may succeed for a while, it will fall down around them. That is a natural law. One that God created with the universe. It cannot be changed. It can't be altered by man. It is there. We actually see that a lot, I think, in the Bible where, when we do what is righteous, good things happen to you. Not so much that God is pouring his blessings out on you, but that he's built it into the universe that when you do certain things, it responds in kind. That's called natural law. And I think that's what he's getting at here. Because he says they disappear like foam down the river, everything they own is cursed. Foam going down the river just naturally happens, right? Like the sun coming up, the moon and the stars coming up at night, the trees growing in the spring and dying off in the fall. These are natural laws. They're built in. We have to do nothing to make it happen. The wicked have to do nothing. God has to do nothing to make this happen to the wicked. They are their own worst enemy. The grave consumes sinners just as drought and heat consume snow. So Sheol, the grave, is designed by natural law of creation to consume the sinner. God created it that way. Their own mothers will forget them. Maggots will find them sweet to eat. Job can be really gross in his descriptions sometimes.
He really can.
No one will remember them. Wicked people are broken like a tree in the storm. Again, these are things that naturally happen. They cheat the woman who has no son to help her. They refuse to help the needy widow. We see that a lot in America today. Women, for some reason, always get taken advantage of. All right, now, let's look at verse 22. God, in his power, drags away the rich. They may rise high, but they have no assurance of life. They may be allowed to live in security, but God is always watching them. And though they are great now, in a moment they will be gone like all others, cut off like heads of grain. That, I think, is where he starts alluding to the end. How death, once, they're going to be cut off just like everybody else. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care how much money you've stolen from many people, how much power you've obtained. You will die like everybody else. And at some point, God will judge you for the life you lived. So I think there's two ideas going on in this passage. One is that idea of natural law occurring to bring down the mighty, the arrogant, the wicked. And then God comes in because he's always watching what's happening. At some later date, God brings his judgment. What do you think of that, of my theory? She's like, okay, she's not talking.
I agree.
Good. We don't have to argue tonight. Now, we get to the mic drop. This is Job. Can anyone claim otherwise? Who can prove me wrong? So that's your challenge out there in TV land. Can you prove Job to be wrong in his assessment? Because everything he's talking about here is what he's observed in life.
Yeah.
This is how it works. The wicked do wicked things. They hurt the poor and needy. They take advantage of vulnerable people. The poor and troubled cry out because of the oppression they feel, because that's what he's talking about, oppression. It's a word we hear a lot today in America. And it looks like God hears them, but he just ignores it. But even though he ignores it, even though the wicked thinks they're hiding what they're doing, they still are washed away eventually, and they fall, and they're exposed. You know, last Thursday we talked about the fall whips. It's still in the news. You can look it up. We're going to go back through it. But we can take any person of power, and it seems like no matter, you know, if they're a wicked person, their wickedness is exposed at some point. Sure, you know, the creation naturally exposes them and brings them down, even if it's not a punishment per se. Their pedestal's knocked out from under them. They're embarrassed. So you're poor, you're needy, the people that have been oppressed get some level of satisfaction from seeing that happen. And then at the great judgment day, the end of time, God will pass his judgment upon all he saw them do. That's Job's argument here. Now, who can prove him wrong? Looks like Bildad's going to try in a very short chapter next week.
Oh, God.
So we will take chapter 25 and chapter 26 together, because chapter 25 is all of 6 verses.
Yeah.
Bildad doesn't have a lot to respond here.
Job says.
Yeah, the mic drop kind of threw them off at
He
this
said,
point.
shut up, Bildad.
You know, because Job raises a lot of good points here. He makes you think about this. You know, God can look like he doesn't care, but he cares enough that he already created within his creation a built-in punishment of sorts. Something someone told me long time ago. Everything we do has a consequence.
Mm-hmm. The ripple effect.
Yes. You know, if we choose to sin against God, we will pay a price. Even though we seek forgiveness, we still have to pay that price.
Yes.
In this life. Not in the next life, because we're forgiven in the next life.
Yeah.
But in this life, your bad choices, I don't care if you're the greatest saint alive on the earth, if you make some bad choices and make some decisions that go against what God wants, you're going to pay a price in this life because God has simply built it into the equation. You always have to pay a penalty. But we don't have to pay the ultimate penalty, which would be damnation. Whereas the wicked who never seek redemption will pay that ultimate penalty. But all of us have to abide by the natural laws God has created. Doesn't matter if we're redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ. When we choose wickedness, there's a price to pay. So we need to remember that. You know, I think that's why we have this whole book here of guidance to try to get us not to do those things. Think about the children of Israel. What was their punishment?
Which time?
The first time for making graven the little golden calves when Moses went on the mount.
They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years.
That was the consequence of their decision. Now, were they condemned at the end of time?
No.
No. But their choices required a consequence. God has built that into the equation.
And something else too that goes along with that is, you know, your consequences don't just punish you, it punishes everybody. Because even Moses got punished
Yeah.
for what they did.
Yes. This is kind of the idea of where the idea of the sins of the father are paid for by the sons. Because, yeah.
But it's not necessarily a father-son thing. I mean, it could be anything.
Right, it could be, the idea is that it doesn't, you know, their choices 300 years ago, my relatives, may have affected my outcome in this life. Because there are consequences to their actions. And they're just built in. These are not things God looks and says, oh, Amanda, you've sinned, so therefore this is going to happen to you. He's watching and he knows what's about to come, because it's like a computer program. You put in the right numbers, you get a specific answer. So when you put in that choice, I choose to do this to this person, there's a consequence. It's either going to be good and be what we would call a blessing,
Yeah.
or it's going to be bad and we call it a punishment or a curse. But that's not God sitting there, I don't think, playing tic-tac-toe or chess with everybody.
Well, I mean, it's something else too. Not that I don't disagree with your
Right.
assessment, but even though it looks like, okay, you notice all this happening to the poor and the
Right,
needy,
yeah.
you know, and everything. Instead of wondering why God's not punishing the wicked,
Yeah.
what are you doing to try to help them?
That's the question you should be asking.
Yeah.
Because that's where you start making good choices. When you go out and you're trying to help those people.
Yeah.
Because that has a good consequence when you do.
Right, because despite what this person's doing to them, and
Yeah.
whether or not God's going to punish that person, you need to do something to help them.
Right.
If you see the need, you need to help fulfill
Because
the
if
need.
you see someone being oppressed and you can stop the oppression, okay, that's a good thing. If you see someone oppressed and you're not doing anything, or you're not complicit,
Right.
I mean, isn't that the same thing as condoning what they're doing? If I go downtown Spartanburg and there's a big riot going down there and they're looting everything and I don't do anything to try to stop it, I'm complicit in it, correct? You know, that's how it works. You're either against it or you're not. So, you know, we have to make these stands, and you got to look at it and say, okay, if I'm agreeing that, oh, well, you know, I don't want to get involved, and that's something I hear all the time, I don't want to get involved. God requires that we get involved sometimes. At least take a stand, call the police, do something. You know, if you see a man beating a woman on the side of the road, or a woman beating a man on the side of the road, you're just going to drive by. How many times have you seen someone stranded on the side of the road at night and you didn't do anything to help?
Well, now I'm not going to lie. If I don't feel, especially if I'm by myself, and it's a
Right.
man.
But there are things you can do, because I
Yeah.
won't stop either, but I'll call Star HP and report there's a stranded motorist here.
I didn't think about that. Sorry, HP.
And that's all you gotta do, Star HP, and they'll connect it to wherever it needs to go. And I've helped them. I'm not putting my life in danger,
Right.
but I'm calling help for them. You know, that's what we're supposed to do, is find ways we can help, not endangering ourselves, but help and not ignore. Because the wicked ignores the plight of the needy. Because if I'm stranded on the side of the road, I hope somebody would call and get me help. Because maybe my cell phone broke, or I don't have one. You never know. But that's my point. Job's making this argument that even though it looks like God's not responding, he is, but he's not doing it necessarily by his own hand yet. He's doing it because he created it to be punishment. He created it in such a way that there's a reaction to every action. There's a consequence to every choice. And it applies to all of us. None of us get out of that. Now, there are times like the flood where he comes in and says, you know what, I'm tired of this, and he passes judgment on the people. Sodom and Gomorrah, God got tired of it and said, you know what, I'm doing away with this. So there are times when God will step in and be actively involved in punishment, but I think most of the time it's indirect, it's passive. It's simply something he created, he knew it was going to happen, and it happens. So we can actually take some comfort in knowing that.
Yeah.
That no matter how much wickedness we see, there's consequences for all these actions. And we don't have to complain to God that he's not doing anything. And we can focus on what we can do to make the situation better.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna finish up there, I tell you.
What's his name? Matthew West? You were talking about that.
He did. What song? Can't remember now, put her on the spot. We're gonna play it Sunday, so you gotta tell me a song.
Sing it to us.
I'm trying to think.
Put her on the spot.
I know it's got "I Made You," or "That's Why I Made You," or something like that in it.
Well, you have to find it and text it to me, so we do it. All right, we're gonna pray, so we get out of here tonight. Lord God, we are so thankful to be in your house, to be in your word. We're so glad, Lord, that we can really dig into some of these ideas and look beyond simply the words on the page, but look at the ideas being expressed and try to understand, what meaning you want to be conveyed, so that we can have a deeper understanding of our role in life, what we should be focused on, what we need to worry about, and that is pleasing you and living our lives the way you want us to live. We really shouldn't be worried about what other people do. They have to answer for that. There are consequences for that. We know that. We need to focus on us and our relationship to you and where we stand. And I think, Lord, if we all did that, if we all take a moment and really focus on how we live our lives, this world would be a lot better. But I think you know and I know and all of us know that that's probably not going to happen. Jesus said before we take the splinter out of a neighbor's eye, we should take the log out of ours, but we don't. We keep those logs in their eyes and we just blast everybody else. I just pray, Lord, that would change. That you'd have a change of heart in all people throughout this world. And that would be more concerned about helping our fellow man than tearing him down. Than stealing his life, from making his life hard and oppressive. Show us, Lord, how we can help to make it better. We're going to thank you tonight, Lord. We're going to praise you as always. And we're going to look forward to living each and every day one step in step with you. In Jesus' name, amen. We'll see y'all next time.
Next week.
Next week, same bat channel.